Wonderful. How do we attain an equanimity of mind, which of course is so important for a spiritual life? There's a beautiful metaphor about this that Puja Swamiji shares very frequently, which is the metaphor of the ocean. On the surface of the ocean, there are always waves. It's the nature of the ocean. Sometimes the waves are very big, sometimes they're small, but nonetheless, the surface of the ocean is always going up and down, based on the moon, based on the weather, based on so many different factors. Those waves go up and down. We have high tide, we have low tide. And yet, the depths of the ocean never change. The depths of the ocean don't even know that there is such a thing as a wave. And so, if we live our lives anchored in the surface, staying with our metaphor of the ocean for a moment, if we live our lives on the surface of the ocean, we're going to go up and down. This is what makes for great sports like surfing or boogie boarding, is that they know there's always going to be waves. I can take my board out and something's going to make it go up and something's going to make it come down. But the depths of the ocean, there's no such thing as high tide or low tide. There's no such thing as a wavy day, a stormy day. In the depths of the ocean, it's always constant. And actually what's very interesting also just biologically is that if you study the oceans, there's much more life and much more interesting life in the depths of the oceans. If you ever go to one of those aquariums or you see one of the Discovery or National Geographic shows about the ocean, the most beautiful, colorful, exquisite life is that which lives in the depths of the ocean. And so that's really true for us as well. We go up and down because we're anchored on a very superficial level. We're anchored in the stock market. We're anchored in our physical appearance. We're anchored in our bank accounts. We're anchored in the actions and reactions of people around us. We're anchored in the weather, the traffic. And the nature of the universe is just such that everything is constantly changing. Whether it's interest rates, whether it's the amount in our bank account, whether it's weather, whether it's the people around us. And so if that's my anchoring, I can never find peace because it's always up and down. And yet, when we start talking about equanimity, the problem is that in theory, most of us want it. We'd love there to be peace. But what that really means, if we really deeply introspect, is I would like there not to be the down wave. When we're going up, if you give most people the choice between would you like to keep riding this wave up or would you like equanimity, most people are pretty content to ride the wave up. We love the success. We love happy moments. We love it when everything's going right. And so when we start craving equanimity, we're craving it because things are going down. And the problem with that is that in order to attain equanimity, we actually have to be prepared. It's not about sacrificing joy. Joy will always be there. What it's about is sacrificing the joy that comes from the superficial level things. So if every time it's a sunny day, or every time our baseball team wins, or every time our child gets an A on an exam, we are ecstatic, just beyond ecstatic, then chances are, when it's a rainy day, when our child fails an exam, we're going to be bereft. And so in order to attain equanimity, we have to actually be prepared as well to give up that wave that takes us up on a superficial level. Because everything that goes up, by the law of nature, it's going to come down. And so when we talk about equanimity, it involves also letting go of the attachment to, oh my God, my sports team. Oh my God, my child. Oh my God, I lost 5 pounds. Oh my God, there was no traffic on the way home. Because the flip side of that is the, oh my God, my sports team. Oh my God, my child. So we anchor ourselves in the depth. And that's the way to attain on a general level that equanimity. The other piece about it, though, is that we have to also look at what steals our equanimity. So one piece of it is just anchoring ourselves in the depths rather than in the surface layer of life. But the other piece of it is, am I constantly bothered by a certain thing or a certain type of thing? So if someone said to you, well, why don't you have equanimity? Chances are most of us would say, well, everything would be perfect if only this person or these people would just behave in this way. Or this one situation would just resolve itself in my favor. Or if just I could be free of this thing. So at times like that, it's also really beneficial and beautiful to spend some time looking at what is it to which I've given my peace. Because peace is actually our nature. That's really our inner nature. If you look at babies, all you've got to do is feed them, change their diaper when it's full, put them to sleep when they're overtired, and occasionally burp them when there's too much gas inside. And they're set. We're not a different species than babies. What's happened is, as we've grown, we've developed all of these attachments and expectations. And we've had expectations that haven't been fulfilled. Shallow ones, deep ones, small ones, big ones. And so we've lost the ability to be in peace. But peace is actually our nature. So if we just can look at what is it that's stealing my equanimity, and then really try to gain some insight into that. And whenever that arises, instead of jumping into the ocean and riding the waves, at that moment when the wave is coming, can I dive into the depths? Can I refuse to let that thing throw me up and down. And these are beautiful moments of introspection and insight of basically, what is it that pushes my buttons? There's a story I love that I'll end the answer with it's a joke story of a man who goes to a doctor and he says to the doctor, "Doctor, something's really wrong. Everything hurts. Whatever I touch, it hurts. I touch my head, it hurts. I touch my back, it hurts. I touch my knees, they hurt. I touch my stomach, it hurts." So the doctor's very surprised because typically people have one complaint. So he runs every test and every scan, and at the end he calls the man in and he says, "I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is there's nothing wrong with your back or your head or your shoulders or your stomach. The bad news is your finger's broken. And since your finger's broken, whatever you touch, it hurts." And this is what happens in our lives. Our lives hurt. We're not in peace. But we blame the things around us. Like the man blamed his headache or his stomach ache or his backache. But the problem is actually that broken connection. Like the man's finger was broken. So if our inner connection is set, then the world doesn't hurt. The minute that the doctor reset and fixed the man's finger, miraculously his headache and his stomach ache and his shoulder ache went away. It doesn't mean in his life the man's never going to get a bad stomach or a headache. It doesn't mean that being spiritual means things aren't going to happen. The world goes up and down. But touching a head that hurts with a finger that's not broken hurts a lot less than touching it with a finger that is. And going through life with a connection that's intact enables us to maintain this equanimity. Enables us to maintain, as Puja Swamiji always says, that peace in the chaos. The chaos is there. But can we anchor ourselves, like in the hurricane? Can we anchor ourselves in the eye of the hurricane? The rest of the hurricane is going crazy. But there's this eye in the center of the hurricane that actually is still. Can we find that? And that becomes the key. And it's a beautiful meditation.
When you are in meditation, that meditation is not when you close your eyes. Whether eyes are open or closed, whether you are sitting or working, whether you are walking or working, all the time you can be in meditation. More meditation, more rest, then you need less sleep. People who need more sleep, it means there is a less meditation. The moment you realize, you'll be amazed that you doesn't need too much sleep. Mostly in sleep people dream. And in those dreams, there are many dreams. And whole night, you are dreaming. Whole day you are dreaming. There's a daydreaming and then the night dreaming. And the life becomes a dream. Life is not to stay as a dream. Those dreams should turn to reality. That reality is that awareness, that consciousness that you have to live all the time. In that sleep also, then you are in meditation. That can happen. Book, yes, no problem. Maybe who knows, whenever he wants the book to be written, will come. Whatever.
I just wanted to mention something about what Pujya Swamiji was saying so beautifully about sleep. The key from what the spiritual masters teach us, as well as what modern science tells us and modern medicine, is it's not actually a question so much of the number of hours, but what time of night you're sleeping. As Pujya Swamiji was saying, most of the time what people do is dream. Well, there's actually what's called a circadian rhythm, which has to do not just with your personal rhythm, but actually with what time of day it is. And regardless of what time you went to sleep, a greater percentage of the sleep cycle is spent in dream sleep toward the morning. The closer it gets to the morning, the greater percentage of dreams. So if you go to sleep at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, even if you sleep 8 hours, you're not actually going to wake up refreshed because you've spent such a huge percentage of that sleep time dreaming. Whereas if you go to sleep at 8, a fabulous ideal, not quite so possible, but nonetheless, we aim for something that early, and then if it becomes 10, 10:30, it's still okay. You spend a huge percentage of time actually in what's called restorative sleep, rather than in REM sleep or dream sleep. And so you actually wake up much, much fresher, even with fewer hours. So the concept of fewer hours is not something that you can just take and apply it across the board and say, oh, well then, instead of going to sleep at 2 and waking up at 10, I'm going to go to sleep at 2 and wake up at 6. It's not going to work. If you want to get by on 5 hours of sleep or less, or 6 or less, or whatever your goal is, rather than chopping off the hours at the beginning, chop them off at the end. Go to sleep as early as you can and chop them off at the end. This is something, of course, that the spiritual masters have been telling us for thousands of years, but modern science and sleep science is actually now catching up and telling us the exact same thing. We see everything and experience everything outside, and yet we're told, look inward for the answers. So how is that possible? If everything is outside, how can we get the answers on the inside? Well, for an answer, you need a question. And I know that's obvious, but I've said it very specifically because if everything is set in our lives, if everything is perfect, if we're living in this state of equanimity, if we're living in a state of bliss, we're not going to be searching for answers. So the fact that we're searching for answers implies that there are questions, which implies that we're not living in a state of exactly how we'd like to be. And what that means is the outside world is there. We all have the same outside world. Every one of us is sitting here in the same place. The temperature is the same. The humidity is the same. The time of day is the same. The sound is the same. And yet, each of us is having a profoundly different experience. Some people may be experiencing incredible depth of divine connection, to be sitting in Puja Swamiji's presence, on the verge of tears, opening up and experiencing a love and a presence inside them that they didn't know was possible. Other people may be wondering what's going to be for dinner. People may be thinking about, oh God, tomorrow I have to do this. We're all in a completely different state. So yes, everything's outside, but what creates the problems and therefore the questions for us is how we interpret it on the inside. How we take that outside world into the inside. Someone says something, looks at us in a certain way, something happens. That's what we call the stimulus. It's happened. But now the response. That's up to us. And it's dependent upon how we interpret the stimulus. And if our response to life is anger and fear and pain and jealousy and victimization and whatever we're going through, we're taking things in a different way. I don't want to say the wrong way, but we're taking them in a different way. A few nights ago, Puja Swamiji was giving the example of a tap of water that's on. Rushing, beautiful, pure water that quenches our thirst. And we have a bucket. And we can use that bucket to fill it up with this beautiful water. But if our bucket is upside down, under the tap, it doesn't matter how great and pure the water is and how wonderful the bucket is. The bucket is not able to benefit from the water. And so the reason that we say look inward for the answers is it's inward where the questions were created, where the problems were created. The outside world is always going to be there. Yes, of course, we do as much as we can to make things better, to heal, to help in whatever capacity we have. But the outside world is always going to do its thing. Everybody has come onto this earth with their own karmic package. And they're going to walk through that karmic package according to their own life. As best as we can, we help them. But our reaction to it, our questions, our pain, our frustration, our anger, is purely an internal response. And so when we say look inward, it means look at why I'm having this response. What is it in me that feels angry, that feels jealous, that feels frustrated, that feels despair? And now it's important to remember that that doesn't mean it's unjustified. I'm not saying it's unjustified. But nonetheless, the reaction has been born and blossomed and come of age within. And if those reactions are creating difficulty in our lives, we need to look within for the answers. And the last quick piece of this is, the other reason we say look in is that the divine lives within each of us. And so that capital T truth, capital K knowledge, however we think of it, all of that to which we would turn outward looking for an answer, lives within us. And so if we just can be still and quiet and focused enough, we can hear it. Otherwise, we run around to, this astrologer, this pundit, this fortune teller, and everybody's going to tell us something different. We don't get answers, we just get more questions. So they say, go within. That knowledge is there. The wisdom is there. We just have to silence the voices of our ego and our fears and our grudges and all of that blocks it from us in order to properly hear.